Oh yeah, the new
Um,
look is kind of weird.
all right. All right, cool. Well, hey, thanks everybody for joining our webinar tonight. Just in the last week, the three of us were chatting and, with the economic uncertainty and kind of weird things happening in the labor market, the stock market going crazy. There's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And so, as dentists and business owners, we got to figure out what are we going to do to make sure we either don't get hurt by this potential economic uncertainty or to make sure we thrive and actually come out of this better than we could imagine. So I got on the webinar tonight with us, I got Mr. Ryan Gross and Dr. Ben Kacos. So Ryan, for those of you that don't know you, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm the founder and owner of CMOShare Dental Marketing. We're a heavy analytics company and dive deep into practice operations numbers, obviously marketing numbers, and in this case, kind of looking at some of the demand out there and what's happened in the last few months from some of the numbers we're seeing. Had some interesting data points that we found that led to some changing and shifting in the market. So it's kind of my background. I've been doing this for about 5 years. Work closely with Dr. Killeen and Dr. Kacos here, and so excited to be on the webinar today.
Cool. Sorry, I had to step away. My dog was going crazy. That's part bad thing about working from home. And then we had Dr. Ben Kakis, killer black belt coach. Ben, just give us a little history of your practice and your what you do in your spare time too.
I spend my time trying to catch up with you, Addison, and there's not enough hours in the day, bro. I need to get a faster bike, I think. Uh, yeah, black belt coach, chief clinical officer for Dental Success Partners, and my little passion project is Peak Dental Resources, providing CE for the um, most asked about topics that we get asked to coach on, the most popular topics for coaching.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And so you hold those peak dental resources days about every couple months, right?
Once a quarter.
Once
Yep,
quarter.
once a
And
quarter.
what's the next one coming up here?
Oh, it's the most popular one. It's our Total Hygiene Solutions, and it's going to be in Dallas.
Oh, cool. All right. Yeah, I went to that one last year in St. Louis, and yeah, it's pretty amazing. So, and it really fires up your hygienists too. So, I took two of my hygienists and we loved it. So, cool. Well, I'm gonna share, Ryan, you were nice enough to kind of create some slides because I've seen you pulled some really good data from the last time. I mean, the last major recession, which was the '08, right? And
Yeah.
so let me pull that up for you here so that we can kind of look at everything. And let's see. So we'll resume this
So
first.
Ryan helps both Addison and myself with our marketing, and we don't get any kickbacks from sharing him with y'all. We just have had great experiences with him, and one of the reasons we've had great experiences with Ryan is because he always backs things up with numbers and has proof. And so this is some very enlightening stuff here.
Yeah. So
Thanks,
Ryan,
Ben.
give
Yeah.
us the rundown on what you saw the last time we kind of went through
Yeah.
this.
So this, let me back up a little bit. Starting last year, I started to notice some trends in the dental world that made me believe, okay, maybe we're seeing something happen here. And not an economist whatsoever, don't claim to have anything with that. But what I do see is I look at dental numbers, dental trends, and then that can kind of predict and tell us what's happening. And so last year I started diving into some of these numbers because started to see it a little bit last year, but obviously more this year. So I did some research, found some data out there from what was the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009, and started really diving into what happened in the dental world back then. And so there, wasn't a lot of information out there, but I was able to find there was actually a practice software company that was collecting information at that time. and showed some of the information. So I'll show it to you here. But what's interesting with it is, that happened between 2007, 2009 is when we know that recession occurred. What we found, and what I found when I was doing this research, is that the dental industry saw a little bit of a delayed downturn. So people, typically during a downturn, people stop buying cars, houses, maybe going out to eat and things like that. But what they don't do is they don't usually limit their medical needs unless it's a necessity. And so what we found overall was that there was a delay, and I'll show you some screenshots here in a minute, but there was a 5% decrease in production in 2010. So that was a year after all this, crash occurred. This was the same time that the DSOs were getting bigger and rising in the country. And so you have a couple of things to unpack here with this. You had an economic downturn. You also had DSOs and corporate coming in, spending more money in marketing and getting more aggressive. And so it was a little bit, two things happening. But if you go to the next slide, Addison, we'll look at some of these numbers. So the first thing to when you see this, what's interesting, you see the disposable income versus collections. And you can see this chart here based upon, the downturn really kicked in 2009, but we didn't see that in the dentistry until 2010. And so went fairly, that's a fairly significant decrease, considering that, I've been doing this for 5 years in dental marketing, and every year has been a growth. We had COVID in there in 2020, but that was an explosion after that. And so we've seen significant growth in the dental industry in the last 5 years. So to see a year where there's actually a downturn, if I was working with these two guys here and we had a year where we lost 5% of revenue, it would be a shock. And so that's something that did occur. And again, it was a little bit delayed there, and it took back until 2011 just to reach the 2009, but then it took until 2012 to exceed the 2008 numbers when it comes to practice collections. And so this is a good example of that delayed downturn. And if you go to the next slide, it's going to show us a little bit on the doctors versus hygiene production. And so, and guys, stop me if there's any questions or any thoughts that you have on any of this as well. But the one thing that's I found very interesting with this is that you can see that people continue to go to the dentist for their hygiene appointments. There was a little bit of a downturn in 2010 there, and you can see the climb there from 2007 to 2009 was significant. So if we would have kept on that track, hygiene was growing significantly during that time. It took a downturn, but what was more important is that the doctor's production significantly went down compared to the hygiene. And so they were on the same track, and then they deviate at this point. And so what this tells us is that people still wanted to get their teeth cleaned, still wanted to get as much routine as possible. The growth for the hygiene wasn't the same. It did go down. But what really kicked in was the larger value or larger production cases decreased. And that's something that I think taking into this next, if we go into an economic downturn here, is to really focus on ensuring you're getting people in the door, but knowing that it's not going to be based on as big as production cases.
Yeah, Ben,
So we're really going to need to focus on volume.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Ben, does that make you think about people's like wanting to use their insurance benefits to the max? When you see the hygiene numbers, mostly for many of our patients, it's driven by 100% covered preventative procedures. When you think of that, what strategically do you kind of go to then? Like in the operational sense, what would you, as a practice owner, what would you read from that graph?
Well, what it tells me is I better have my hygiene department maximizing their opportunities with each patient, right?
Mm-hmm.
And make sure they're taking advantage of all the codes that they have at their disposal, make sure they're diagnosing properly. And then probably we need to be sure that we're clearing room for the hygiene department to really excel. And what I mean by that is so many of us are at capacity with hygiene, and we know that access to providers is really an issue there. And so many practices are just booked to the gills with standard prophies. In a hygiene schedule full of prophies, it's good, but it's not great. And so what I'd really encourage people to do is to go ahead and pre-block those SRP blocks, even if you need to pre-block the GT2s and pre-block the new patients, right? So that you can maximize productivity with your hygienist.
Yeah. And for everyone that wasn't in your Peak Dental Resources hygiene course, the GT2 is what exactly?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, and that's slang. Scaling in the presence of gingivitis, right?
Okay.
So there are additional codes, and I posted on social earlier this week with some of those additional codes. You've got the irrigation code, which is underutilized. You've got scaling in the presence of gingivitis, and then what plagues most practices is underdiagnosis of perio, and how to adequately diagnose it, and two, how to adequately create value to the patient and communicate to the patient. In our practice, there's some 4-letter words, and those are probing depths, bleeding, and bone loss. Patients don't give a flip about that, right? There's other ways to communicate the severity of the diagnosis, and other ways to talk about treatment in which patients can wrap their head around it and want to say yes.
Yeah, totally. Well, and yeah, by making sure that those hygienists have the opportunities to close treatment. And so pre-blocking is just huge, because if you say, oh, this is really important, this is your health care here, and then you say, we'll get you in 3 months, that's not going to go over very well.
And if they're super motivated, they're going to call around.
Yeah. Yeah, if you did a really great job of motivating them and then you can't serve them, that's a recipe for disaster. The other thing this makes me think of as we're coming up towards the end of the year is, I mean, I know it's only August, but we should be thinking about those end of the year, use it or lose it insurance letters, making sure people know, hey, you have $1,000 left in your insurance, bank account. Let's use that money. Let's use it before you lose it. Let's get treatment done now, when you could potentially still, use that money before you go over to next year. So Ryan, what does this next one look for?
Yeah, this one's really interesting. So what you got to look at this is the patient visits versus the gross production per visit. So this one took me a little bit to think through of like, okay, how did this happen? How does this even make sense? And so what you can kind of look at this is, again, we see 2009 visits start to go down. And what I'm going to kind of do a theory on this is what I see is that these visits went down of, we had consistent hygiene slowed down as well, but people started doing follow-up treatment went down in 2009, kept on, so the number of visits went down, kept on going down and down to its low peak in 2011. But the production per visit, didn't, it actually climbed. And what I think occurred in this is you had a lot of people who didn't go to the dentist. The people who were going to the dentist, who had the funds at that point in time, were spending the money, because obviously during this period of time here from 2010 to 2011, there were people who were still struggling, but the people who weren't struggling were going to the dentist and getting care taken or getting care done. And so they were spending more, or not say more, but they were driving that production per visit up for the patient. So to take a look at this, it's interesting. More than likely what you would see with this is that patient visit number decreasing were people who were financially struggling the most. And it was really, carried in 2011 and started bouncing way back 2013 is when it actually got back up. So those are the people who were struggling the most at the time, who probably didn't do as much preventative care, didn't go in, and definitely weren't having additional procedures done at that time. Whereas the people who could afford it and who were doing just fine were still going to the dentist, which then drove that production per visit up. So this chart here shows you just the sheer decrease in the number of visits here per month, just to see, we were sitting at a peak in 2008 of 110, and it goes down to about 100 and under 104 in 2011. So again, that delayed downturn there, you can see it again here. And I would say this year is a little different, and I can get into it here in a minute, but I want to get your guys' thoughts on this chart here. But this year is a little bit different with this, is that what we're seeing now already is that there's we're seeing more emergency visits come up and less. So if we take an average practice, say, gets 50 new patients a month, in the past, let's just say 40 of those are through hygiene, 10 are through emergencies. What we're seeing now, though, is that number to shift a little bit. And it's like 15 through hygiene, or 35 through hygiene, 15 through emergencies. And so what this is already occurring is, I think, what I would have to speculate, and we've been seeing this for 6 months now, that there are people who are foregoing some of the preventative dental care, and then guess what? They have to come in for an emergency. So the demand for total appointments still, I think, is okay. Um, but we're seeing more people do emergencies at this point. And so 2024, what I think is going to happen here, we're going to decrease in higher production treatment. So those big cases are going to decrease. More reliance on insurance and savings plan, bread and butter dentistry, and hygiene and exams are going to remain strong. You're just not going to get as much production out of those at this point. And it depends again how we fall, if we fall in this delayed downturn or not. If the production per visit should go up once we hit the bottom of the amount of people the patient visit. So thoughts on that, you guys?
Well, what I take from that is there's less people saying yes, and then production increases as the decay process continues forward. So what could have been an MOD turned into a crown, what could have been a crown turned into a root canal and a crown, or an extraction and implant. So lack of yes in the beginning led to higher procedures per visit, higher cost per procedure, production per visit later.
Yeah, and this is something that I think, I've gone to multiple of Ben's peak dental resource courses, and what you do, Ben, and Addison does this as well, but I know firsthand from you, Ben, from your courses, is how good you are at getting your team, and the voice and messaging that you do to your patients is going to be critical in terms of educating them on what they need to do and what procedures they need to do. For example, and I can't do justice to what you do, but you're so good at being able, a lot of times dentists come in and they present, this is what they present, yes or no. But you have this ability, and what you do is you train your doctors, and what you do in your team to really give them options to get some type of production. Can you talk a little bit just about what your system there for that is?
Well, moving into a financial downturn, everybody's going to be concerned about money, right? So when you have those people that are concerned about money, then it's all about communicating that completing their dentistry now is not an expense, it's a savings, right? What history has shown us is that the patients that delay treatment end up spending more money later. So if you want to try to save money, if your budget is top priority for you, then completing treatment now is going to save you a lot of cash. That would be my message.
That's exactly the message that I would say to my patients as well. Like, I think, when we have this fear of a recession and some of these graphs with downward slopes for a couple of years, we got to remember, it looks like the numbers, there's still people completing treatment. So we got to focus on those patients that are going to complete the treatment, try to highlight, like Ben, you do a great job of targeting the UPS drivers because they have the best insurance. Like, you give out Yetis to those folks. Like targeting big employers around town with gift baskets, or like really spearheaded marketing into those workplaces, which is really good. Like, very narrow focus on just getting those patients with that great insurance. Those patients that have really good insurance and stable jobs might be the people that are still completing treatment. But I totally agree with you, though. You basically got to say, you either fix it now for $100 or you fix it next month for $200. And basically by doing it now, you're saving $100. And so I think that's a no-brainer.
And then really leaning on the monthly payment options.
Yeah, making sure. Do you add that into every treatment plan you do now, Ben?
Every single case presentation gets monthly payment options. In the trailing 12 months, we financed almost $900,000 worth of care.
Nice.
Yep.
And then is that a mix between internal and external, or mostly external?
No internal financing.
Okay. Just too complicated. And
I don't want to carry the risk.
Yeah. Okay.
And
it,
Ben's a good example. Well, say real quick, Ben's a good example and a good person to reach out to on this that I'd recommend if you have questions, follow up. Check out his Peak Dental Resource course. But the difference thing with him, or interesting thing with him, is in the area that he's in Shreveport, there's a lot of lower income families, a significant amount. It's one of the highest we work with in the country in terms of lower income. But what he's been able to grow in the last 2 years and a growth off of this, he's figured out a way to already already get conversions and already to get production from people who may not have a financial stability, like a lot of the rest of the country. And so for him to overcome this already, I mean, Ben, I think you're in a good situation or a good space because you've had enough practice on this of what messaging to use to get people who may not have the financial means to be able to accept treatment and give them offers and give them the ability to get the dental care that they need. And so I think that's something that's critical of when you're listening to what Ben's talking here today, is really taking that he's already had to do this. And I mean, he'll know, he tells me how difficult his market is. But his numbers are increasing significantly month to month based upon, I think, his commitment to ensuring that he gets production accepted.
Well, one of the things that dentists are very uncomfortable doing is asking somebody what their budget is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a conversation that we have day in and day out, right? You cannot present $5,000 worth of treatment to somebody with a $1,000 budget, right? They walk out the door with nothing. So we ask, do you have a total budget or a monthly payment in mind that you would be comfortable with, right? And I just tell them, I say, hey, look, imagine we're going car shopping. I've got every car in my lot that somebody could ever want, but I'm not going to walk you over to the Jaguars if you're looking for a Honda Accord. What's your budget? What do we have to work with? I'll say one of the unique things about dentistry is there's a solution for every budget, right? Help me help you.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, and Addison, well, I'm going to give it some, just so you can maybe give an example of what you do with this is it was actually, last week. Last week, I see Addison as my dentist. He's out of town, but I woke up with a cold sore on my lip. I thought it was a cold sore. And so I messaged the other doctor at the practice, and he has someone give me a call. And this is a great example, I think, of ensuring that someone gets in the door. So his front desk at exactly 8 o'clock gives me a call and says, "Okay, Ryan, hey, we heard you have a cold sore. We can get a laser treatment on that. Can you come in at 8:45?" And my response was, "Well, I'm not sure if it actually is. That might just be a pimple or something." And so I'm like, I don't know if I really want to go in and do it. Her response to me, even though I know this world and she knows me, her response was, "Well, Ryan," and I said, "What do you think I should do?" And her response was, "Well, I don't know enough about cold sores or that treatment, but I can tell you that," and I forgot the person's name who helped do the laser treatment. She is an expert on this. And what I can tell you is she's going to be able to look at this and tell you what's going on. Plus, it's not going to hurt to come in and have this taken care of to get you out of the pain. And so, here's me who is in the dental world, who's connected. I was like, all right, I'll be in 45 minutes. That could have easily turned around where, especially with the front desk person knowing who I was, to say, "Oh, okay, well, let us know if you want to come in for an appointment, we can get you in." So she got me in the door, even though I'm already have intimate knowledge of the system and they knew who I was. So Addison, can you, I guess, give a little bit about how you do your phone training skills to ensure that someone's asking a question? Like, she didn't answer my question, but she gave me confidence that when I got there, it was going to be taken care of.
Well, yeah. I mean, with phones, you got to answer them. And now we do a good job of answering between 8 and 5, or actually between 7 a.m. and straight up 5 o'clock. So we do a good job there. We probably answer 92% of our calls, but of course, we're still missing phone calls after hours. And we use Flex, and the Flex, it'll text back if we miss a phone call. It'll text back, "Hey, sorry we missed you. If you need an appointment after hours, here's our scheduling link." So it always texts with that. But if they don't schedule, we always do text them back later. Like the next person in the morning that comes in 7 a.m. says, "Hey, sorry we missed your phone call. Did you need something? Can we get you on the schedule?" So being hungry, I kind of go back to Patrick Lencioni's like ideal team player: humble, hungry, and smart. Well, like you got to be hungry for those patients. Like they call you, they're leaving their phone number on your phone. you need to be hungry as hell to get back out to them and just be like, hey, because that could be, I mean, it could be an occlusal filling that just chipped off something, or it could be a huge implant that's like $5,000 that you just let walk away because you didn't have your front desk reach back out to them. So, I mean, just getting patients in, I think that's a huge thing. The other thing though, you put on this 2024 outlook, bread and butter dentistry. I can definitely see where that's going to be huge, but I also think that we got to have the clinical breadth to solve almost every one of their issues. Like, not to get outside of our scope, but definitely if you haven't already, you need to be really well versed and well trained on molar root canals, doing those difficult extractions. I know Ben does IV sedation. We do IV sedation in our practice. That's a huge tool to basically get larger treatments. And even sometimes it's just the normal. Like, people just say, hey, I am so nervous. I want this crown or this DO filling done under sedation. And you might think that that's, for us, we do it every day. We know it's not scary, but to that patient, that's a huge deal. And 30, 45 minutes of IV sedation, that's $450. That if they are that scared, they will pay that money. So adding in some of these clinical procedures, I mean, in my mind, doing the difficult root canals and doing the difficult extractions are two of the things that you should always try to keep in-house. Ben, are those the kind of the top two things to keep in-house for you as well?
Yeah, so when we're talking about a situation like this, I always encourage folks to look at what are you referring out the most of, okay? And typically you're going to hear that it's extractions and root canals. You're exactly right. So if we're headed into a financial downturn, it's probably not a good time to go take the spear continuum. You're not going to have 28 unit veneer cases walking through the door like you used to, right? It's probably not a good time to do the all-on-X procedure, CE and training. But getting good at extractions, getting good at endo, and implementing PRF, that's standard of care in our practice, it's not a huge moneymaker because we choose to make it, because it is standard of care, we don't charge everybody $500 for a PRF that comes with every single extraction, right? But if you're adding $125 on top of an extraction, that's 33% increase in production of that procedure, right? So PRF, socket grafting, that's worth more than the extraction itself. So if you're doing extractions without socket grafts and without PRF, very, very easy way to increase revenue. And a very, very, very easy conversation to have during a financial downturn. And here's how that would sound for me. Hey, look, I understand the implant sounds very hard to imagine right now financially. So what I want to do is I want to encourage you to take advantage of the benefits of this bone grafting procedure, because what I know is when you're ready for an implant in a year, 20% of your bones are already going to be gone. But if you can just do the bone graft now, you're going to set yourself up, buy yourself a little bit of time so that we can have a more successful implant later. And that's a much easier sell than the implant on somebody that's focused on dollars and cents.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think going into in the next slide here, I'll talk a little bit, but when you're talking about, and I'll just jump to this since we're talking about it, is the general practices are keeping more patients in-house. That's going to be big. So this is basically what was different from 2008, 9, 10 compared to now, but keeping those services in-house and being teed up for those big opportunities is going to be important, because now, between Ben and Addison's practice, I mean, very few things can get sent out of house. And so the more that your practice can do, IV sedation is a game changer. And the more that you can do in-house, you're going to keep that production, and you're going to be able to have that add-on to ensure that you're getting the most production out of the people that are in the door. So that's hugely important. Other things on this too is we're in a more competitive market now. Every dentist that comes out of dental school or buys a practice is thinking about doing some type of marketing, whereas in 2008, 9, 10, there was a fraction of the people doing marketing. So most of them are doing it now. There's more corporate dentists going on. More dentists are seeking, patients are seeking a dentist online. Online marketing has increased a lot. So those are things that are different. So you have to make sure you're positioning yourself to be ready for that. One of the things that we've already noticed this year is there's some odd numbers from that we've seen from new patient flow and production this year, where we've had some practices on months where I'd expect them to do well have actually seen a decrease. These are usually smaller practices. The practices that own their market share or in the top 3 of their market share are doing really well. But then the ones that aren't are seeing a little bit of a struggle. And I think part of that comes with this market instability. And so like Addison and Ben are excelling at this point, but the practices are, 1.2 million, 1.4 million that are younger are having a little bit more instability. And so I think the more
Now,
you're
I
established
mean,
and ready for this.
without making too many broad generalizations, but what do you see from those practices that are struggling, or vice versa? What do you see from Ben in my practice or some of these other high performers you work with? What are they doing right now that is continually pushing the trajectory upward versus stagnation?
Yeah, I think it's kind of, there's one thing that you guys both do, one's doing right and one's doing not as well as, so the practices that are struggling typically have an issue with some of their availability. And what I mean by that is if they're sitting there with 40 new patient blocks through hygiene, and those are consistently getting filled, but they're not really, or I shouldn't say that, they're not managing their availability well. And so they're not focusing on, hey, I need to get emergencies in and hygiene. They're not really looking at that open schedule to optimize the flow into the practice. They're also just not as strong when it comes to online market share. And so the two things there is, one, they're not managing their schedule, I think, well, and adapting to what is needed. And they're also not focusing on, or don't have an online presence that is getting them as much flow as they could, where both of you guys do a great job of ensuring that you have more availability than what you need. So like Ben and I talk about this all the time, is like if he wants 150 new patients or 125 new patients, he needs 140, 150 new patient blocks. And he finds a way to get them, or he finds a way on the schedule to ensure that, we're going to get emergencies and we're going to get those limiteds in, we're going to get people in the door. That's the difference, is you both are focused highly on getting people in the door, and getting the leads and getting the at bats.
What we saw this summer, and the numbers told us this, is that patients were looking to schedule online, and if we didn't show availability online, they wouldn't even call.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we now make every single open block in our schedule an online availability, and we created an emergency only column, right? So that somebody can schedule 8 hours a day, every single day, for an emergency.
Yeah, that's
a great idea.
Yeah, and what Ben's talking about this, and this happens all the time. I can show this case after case. If you go to Ben's website right now and there's not an appointment for 2 weeks, you will see his phone calls from the website decrease, because we can tell by the behavior on the websites if someone clicks schedule online and then they click to call. That happens so often because what they're doing is they're browsing, say, is there an availability? If there's availability, there's more likely for them to call, because not everyone wants to schedule online. They want to see, when can I schedule? So they might go and they look and say, okay, there's an appointment on Wednesday and Thursday. Well, then they call the office and say, I'd like to get an appointment. If there's not that availability, phone call conversions will decrease significantly during that time. And Ben found that out. He opened up online scheduling in, I think it was April or May, or it was April, and he could see the ebb and flow of call conversions. And Ben tracks every single call that comes in. He has someone listen to every single call that comes in, and he shows these numbers. And you could see the weeks where his online availability was down, his calls go down. All he do is open it back up, boom, right back up. And so he's getting those leads and at bats, and he's closing them.
Well, let's just test this out here, Ben. This is a real deal.
Live. Oh gosh.
So, all right, let's see. We go to how, this is the Flex Online scheduling. Find me an emergency consult Monday at 8 a.m. Nice. So this has been, you just open up one extra column just for emergencies and you tie it to this scheduling block. Is that right?
That's correct.
Sweet. That's a really good idea. So if if you guys have the ability to do that, set up an extra, like a dummy chair, potentially have an assistant, just run that chair. I mean, how do you mix that into your doctor's schedule? I mean, I know you as personally, you just run a really busy doctor's schedule. So do you just fit that in, or,
Yeah, between myself and my associates, somebody should be able to at least get in there and triage the patient, right? And we make those blocks 1 hour so that we don't end up bottlenecked. The other interesting thing that we discovered here is that we played around with deposits, okay, for that appointment slot. We went from a $50 deposit, and we had really good acceptance, to a free appointment. And what we discovered is that people would make appointments and not show up at all. Right now we're testing the $35 appointment because I want to make the barrier of entry low, but I want some commitment there. I don't want somebody that's not going to show up to take up the opportunity for somebody else to schedule that Monday at 8.
Yeah, totally. So Ryan, you had a couple more slides here. So I will share this
Yes.
here. So
Yeah.
you kind of talk about increasing your Google spend, or at least, maximizing or optimizing it. So tell us a little bit more about what you have here.
So back from the day we found, back in 2007, it was about $213 a month was the average Google ad spend. In 2024, it's even higher than 1333. This is actually a little bit of data from last year, but it's around that. It's probably about 1450 now. That's a massive increase in ad spend there. So this is only going to continue. Is what we're seeing is, and I was talking to somebody about this, is that in the past, we would see, if you look at all the new patients come from marketing, if you would break that out, let's just say 60%, and this was pretty average, 60% would come from organic searches and 40% from Google ads. Well, that's almost been flip-flopped now, or 50-50 at least, where ads are becoming more important, but the cost is driving up. And so, one thing is to really analyze your ad spend and making sure you're getting the best out of the spend you're doing. And so that's something that we do very carefully as we look at, okay, what's the cost per conversion? What are we getting? And making sure those conversions are quality conversions too, because something that, you got to really understand Google well, because, Google has multiple different ways to do ads, but, one of them is Google Ad Search Partners put ads in places that they're going to be low qualifying patients. And so you might get a lot of conversions, but they're not actually, when I say a conversion, is people trying to schedule from an ad, but then they're not showing up. They're not actually scheduling. They're just either going to your online scheduling or not clicking anything. So you want to make sure the people that are going to your ads, that are clicking and trying to call or schedule online, are quality. And so just because your number goes up 1 month, or say 3 or 4 months, doesn't mean that's a positive thing. You really have to look at you have to be able to analyze those conversions to ensure that it's matching and you're actually getting new patients in. Otherwise, you can be making some poor decisions there. But especially with like the rise of the DSO and more competitive dentists, there's more and more money going into Google Ads. So I would really, that's something that you two are very aggressive with. I mean, and anyone knows me knows I'm a little bit more conservative on the ad spend. We try to get the most amount of quality conversions out of the least spend. And so you guys are on top of it and you're like, hey, no, like, Ben this week was like, I don't really care. We're doing it. We're going to blow this thing up. And he's like, if we need to put another 500 or 1,000 into it, because he sees the results, then let's do it. And so I would say just analyze your spend, analyze what you're doing, and ensure you're getting the most out of it.
Yeah. So I wanted to add that probably the most successful business owner I know here in Shreveport, he's got multiple businesses, and their total revenue starts with a B for billion
Wow.
in revenue. And what he told me is that he invests more in his business during financial downtimes than in successful times. Okay. And I took that to heart. And you got to think about all the other dentists. When things get tight, what are they going to do? They're going to get scared. They're going to spend less. This is your opportunity to spend more, to take over market share, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they're falling asleep at the wheel, put your foot on the gas. And to just reiterate what Ryan said, our conversation last week is, I said, I'm ready to put my foot on top of their head. tell me how I can pay you more money. I'm like his dream client. I said, propose something. I said, I want to spend more. I want to get more aggressive when everybody else is falling asleep. Let's put together a plan to drop the hammer.
Yeah, and you're 100% correct on that. And I can give a real example of this. During COVID, when people shut down, the one thing that when I did this with Addison was we got together, and this was May, or it was the end of April, I think in May, when things were still shut down, and Addison's like, let's put our foot on the gas, because when it opens back up, I want to be the first that people see. And so we started doing this with all the practice we worked with back then, and said, hey, let's really get aggressive in marketing. And then guess what? Dental practices, things start opening back up. People started wanting to go to the dentist again. And the practices that put the resources in when nobody else was marketing, and this is going to happen, is when the economy goes down, or if it goes down, people will tighten up. And marketing is one of those things that sometimes it gets cut. And there's reasons I think you should and shouldn't cut that. But in this case, the ones who were aggressive when things were still shut down during COVID exploded after. And Addison was a perfect example of that, how big he got after that, because we were top of market in Lincoln at that time. And so 100%, it's not anecdotal. This is, there's evidence to show that investing when a downturn in the market will get you when it comes out. And it's going to be more competitive. If let's just say the number of people number of people looking for a dentist goes down 20%, there's still a lot of dentists trying to go after those people who are looking. So you're gonna have to get really aggressive to ensure you're getting the numbers that you were getting before, when there's less people looking for a dentist and the same amount of dentists looking or trying to acquire those patients.
Yeah. And even from personal experience, just in the last week, we looked at my Google ads and we kind of separated them out. I took my entire budget and started segmenting, at least with your team's help, Ryan. And we spent some money towards wisdom teeth, some towards brand, some towards hygiene appointments. And we separated our Google ads groups to kind of get a little bit more granular, to just see what kind of patients are we getting off of each ad group. But in general, though, we get a lot of new patients. I don't spend more. Like, we just increased our budget to $1,750 a month. So, for the number of new patients, though, it's not, am I wrong, Ryan? You see some corporates spending $5,000 to $6,000 a month.
Yeah. Oh,
for
yeah.
practice.
Yeah. So some of the bigger corporate DSOs will spend 5,000. Typically, it's around 5,000 is the minimum. When we see in some areas of the country 10,000. In Southern California, we see 20,000 a month, and
Wow.
so it's crazy. And so that they're putting money there. They kind of just throw out more towards as many patients as possible. I'm a fan of getting the right patient in the door as much as possible, or the one that has the most opportunity to convert. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Here's a few. Yeah, well, go ahead.
Yeah, what do you think? So yeah, what from a marketing standpoint, what do we got to do here?
Yeah, I would know your market, your competitors, like I was just talking about. Know what you need to spend. Know do as much research as you can to understand who your competitors are and what they're doing, and then market. That drive that demand. General emergencies. Optimize your website and Google Business Profile. Strategic Google Ads, things like that. If you stick to the basics and you just ensure that you're gaining market share, I think you're going to be okay. And things that once they get into the house, get into the practice, I think that what would you guys, we've already talked about trying to get some conversions and how to up, to ensure that you're getting the most out of every patient that comes in the door. But one thing I was going to ask both of you is, go to the next slide, Addison, because there's some operational stuff on here. When we look at total active patients, hygiene availability, we talked about all this stuff here. But tell me something that you guys both do a phenomenal job on your phone answer rate. Incredible job. And so can you give some insight on how you do that? Because that seems to be a struggle and a difficulty for a lot of practices.
Yeah, I'll say what I do. Assistants, when they are not in the back, either cleaning rooms, sterilizing, or, seeing a patient, they should be sitting up front, or they're standing at one of the computers in the back where there's a phone at every computer. And so I'm totally okay with them sitting at those computers in between patients. But, part of that is you answer the phone. and, every phone call should get answered. I mean, do we do a good job? Yes, we still miss a couple calls a day during working hours, but generally, if it's between 7 and 5, we almost never miss a phone call. Ben, what do you do to try to get that as high as possible?
Well, like you said, you've got to have the facility in order so that the phone can be answered all over the building. We measure and report the number of missed calls. And operationally, it's important to know if you've got enough ears, if you've got enough people that can listen on the phone. And I think a lot of people are overworking their admin, their treatment coordinators, and don't have the capacity to answer more phone calls. So we measure and we report. We have phones around the office, and we have a protocol that if this thing gets if it rings twice, then it actually rolls over to one of my virtual assistants in the Philippines. He's there ready to answer the phone. He or she is there ready to answer the phone every single time.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
well, to say something else that I think Ben does well with this, and this was a game changer, is because him and I were talking. I'm like, Ben, like we didn't really analyze his phone data for a little bit, and we started to pull into it. And he started hiring this. I mean, we did analyze it, but then he went to the next step of hiring this person to review and listen to the calls. As soon as he started reporting those numbers to his team, it changed it because now they looked at it and I think we at some point you were at like in the 70% call answer rate. You literally start reporting it to your team and it jumped up to like 90% or whatever. It's very close to, I think it flows between like 88 and 93% or something like that. But you just started reporting, holding people accountable, and it changed it overnight. It was that simple. Because I get a report from the person who tracks the calls every Monday, and she shows me how many calls came in, everything. And that's something that I think is a game changer for Ben's team, is to report those numbers.
Yeah, that's huge. Just knowing the data, like just showing your team the data. That's the Hawthorne effect, if I'm not mistaken. The cost of a phone, I think I use Mango phones. I don't know what you use, Ben. But like the cost of a phone in my office is $25 a month. You count that by 12, we're talking less than, $300 or so. So $300 a year for a physical phone, if you answer one patient phone call and get that patient in the door for $1,000 worth of treatment, whether it's an extraction, crown, whatever, that phone pays for itself.
Mm-hmm.
So don't step over pennies or don't step over dollars to pick up pennies by going cheap on a phone and just saying, well, we don't need an extra phone because that's another $300. No, just don't do that. So if you can stick another phone in sterilization so that as people are cleaning instruments, they could pick up a phone if there's a computer there. If there's an extra spot for a phone, I would put one there. I've got tons of phones. I even have a few extras sitting in a box ready to go when I get some new desks installed in a few weeks. So I think that's just super important. I think that's your next slide here is,
Yeah, just showing you an example of your call answer rate. Yeah.
Yeah, that
So,
was,
I mean, for you take, this is the unknown is technically answered. So this time frame that I was looking at, you were answering 96.6% of your calls. That's amazing.
That was a good time. a good short 4 weeks of time, I guess. And then we have a final list of some other ideas that we kind of,
I think Ben's got to wrap it up here soon. So if you want to, kind of go through. And
but basically,
Ben, do you have any parting stuff too with this?
Say again, Ryan.
Ben, I know your time's getting running low here. Like if you want to kind of wrap up your thing of anything that you have, any other thoughts or off of this list here from Addison.
I think we've done a really good job of talking about what a operator can do in their facility, immediately, changes to make, how to advertise, how to communicate, how to work their schedule, what procedures to learn. I think we've done a pretty darn good job.
Yeah. Totally. So cool. Well, I think we'll post this. This will be a webinar, since it's in DSN here. So post some other questions for everyone watching. We'll try to answer them here as well. And of course, we're all, around the DSN universe. And if you're interested in Ben's course, what's your website, Ben, for Peak Dental Resources?
PeakDentalResources.com.
All right,
Yep.
sweet.
Yep.
And Ryan, if
October
people want
10th is the hygiene course. It's made for entire hygiene teams, and there's a DSN discount. DSN member 2024, or it's DSN member 24. Yeah,
cool. And that's October 10th in Dallas, Texas, right?
that's right.
Sweet.
Yeah.
And Ryan, if people want to reach out to you, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can reach out to me on Workplace on DSN, or you can go to mycmoshare.com. So it's mycmoshare.com. Happy to offer any advice, especially to DSN and DSI members. Reach out anytime.
Cool.
Guys, I enjoyed it. I think this will help a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely will. So, all right. Appreciate spending some time away from the family tonight, and we'll talk to you soon.
Have a great day.
Thanks,
See ya.
guys.